Creating is hard as hell, but community can make all the difference. Join We Create Daily, our community of storytellers of all kinds who, like you, are looking to advance their craft, careers, and creativity. Join our membership community today at thecreatedaily.com. That's thecreatedaily.com. And make your creative journey a little easier alongside like-minded storytellers just like you. One thing I will say to writers and artists and everyone out there listening, never stop. You can pause, you can take a break, you can rest, but never stop the craft, never stop the writing. You can that doesn't mean you have to write for the business. You could just be writing for yourself, but don't stop writing because it's so hard to get back. It was so hard. We did it.
Woo, woo.
We're here. We are here with a whole podcast. A whole podcast. Not half a podcast. A whole podcast.
That's right. 100.
Welcome to the Creative Cut Up Podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. I'm Felicia Pride, a writer, director, producer, head honey and honey child, and head storyteller of the Create Daily, a platform I founded in 2012 to help storytellers, especially those of us who are historically excluded, thrive creatively and professionally. And I'm here with my co-host because we got some cutting up to do.
We sure do. I'm Dria Rowland, the creative executive at Honey Child and a writer and producer.
Yes, she is.
And I'm Georgette Pierre, a voice actor and producer. You can hear it, right?
Oh, we hear that voice, honey.
Oh,
we
yeah.
hear the voice.
Oh, yeah.
So join us weekly where we talk shop and smack and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And from 3 different perspectives, which I love, providing tangible tips to support your creative practice, your career, and your artist self. Because we all know that being an artist is hard as hell.
Oof. Say that.
But the Creative Cut Up is here to help. Shall we begin, ladies?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Welcome to another edition of the Creative Cut Up Podcast.
We here.
We are here, honey,
Yes.
honey. I had posted recently that I've been a teaching artist since 2005. So almost 20 years I've been a teaching artist. And I mean, I have done tons of I visited every library in Baltimore City doing after school programs. I've taught teachers in the South. I have taught on the college level, community colleges in the Bronx, in Baltimore. I have done storytelling camps in DC. So all types of teaching artist work. But it was interesting because when I got to LA and then became a TV writer and quote unquote a fancy TV writer, I was kind of scared to be teaching because like, what would people think that I'm teaching, you know, at different levels, again, workshops, classes, podcasting, whatever it looks like. Because my mom was an educator and she has bestowed this gift, this calling on her 2 daughters. And I was just kind of nervous about that. But what I realized is that it's just part of who I am and I'm going to be teaching till the end. And because for me, it's an exchange of knowledge, right? It's an exchange of game. It is also inspiration. It is also for all of us. There's more than enough to go around. It's for all of us to make our work, to tell our stories. And part of what came out of just me being a teaching artist was, so the Creative Comeback is sort of my umbrella term for a few things that we offer through the Create Daily. One is the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, which is a hardcover, beautifully designed book designed by an amazing Black woman designer.
Yes.
And it has, 30 days of lessons and prompts and everything to get back on creative track. We also have the 21-day Creative Comeback Challenge, which we are launching again very soon. So look out for that. But those came out of me, my own creative comeback, because I stopped writing for about 7 years, and starting to write again was one of the most difficult things that I had to do. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But once I got back to writing again, I said, I need to document this. One, for myself, so it don't happen again. But 2, for people who are stuck, for people who have stopped writing or have come away from their creative practice. Like, I need to share this information, share this knowledge. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today, is how I made my creative comeback, how you can too, and the importance just of sharing the journey.
I know we have people in our community that are navigating different aspects of their artistry, right? You started on the author side of things. And so would love to know what led you to stop writing as far as like books, and then the navigation back into that for those that have never touched that world of writing books before, any form of books. Yeah.
So just a little bit of history and context. My first piece was in a community newspaper, and it was a review of Mary J. Blige's No More Drama album. And that piece came out in 2002. So that was the first time something that I've written had been published and had my name on it, and it changed my life. From there, I continued being a freelance entertainment journalist, essentially. I expanded from writing about music to also writing about books to sort of writing about my life and myself. One of my biggest dreams was to write books. And I was able to finally do that. One of the books that I wrote was called The Message, 100 Life Lessons from Hip Hop's Greatest Songs. And that really opened me up to becoming the teaching artist that I am today, because we took that book around the country. I remember just me and my mom, I would have this like little cart, and I had my own projector. We would take that cart to schools around the country. We would take that to juvenile justice centers. We would take that to libraries. We were just like on the road with this book, with this curriculum that she helped me create. That book opened me up. And then books became hard. The writing of books became hard. I think I was also feeling, a little bit of imposter syndrome. I think I was also feeling burnt out. I think I was feeling uninspired. I didn't really know. So what was crazy is that about 2 weeks ago, I found a book that I wrote because I had got a 2-book deal from Harlequin. Harlequin used to have a young adult line called Kamani True. It was for like Black YA. And I had a 2-book deal from Kamani True. The first book was called Patterson Heights, that published and went on and did really well. Also brought me into schools and whatnot. But the second book was called Homecoming. I totally forgot about this book. I wrote a whole book, and Kamani True and Harlequin did not accept it. So they didn't publish it. They said it felt too much like an adult book. It was basically about a young girl whose father comes back from prison, and then their relationship. And I don't know how I found this book on my laptop 2 weeks ago, but I was like, I wrote a whole ass book that wasn't published. What? And so that was kind of wild. But I think that just something was was hard for me. And I couldn't sell another book. I had written proposals. I couldn't sell another book. So I just stopped writing. I stopped writing, which was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. One thing I will say to writers and artists and everyone out there listening, never stop. You can pause, you can take a break, you can rest, but never stop the craft, never stop the writing. You can that doesn't mean you have to write for the business. You could just be writing for yourself, but don't stop writing, because it's so hard to get back. It was so hard. So I stopped writing for about 7 years and really became in service of other artists. I became an impact producer. So I was developing large scale marketing campaigns for social justice work, audio work, documentary, books. And that was very gratifying work. But the closer that I got to, especially in working with documentaries and film, and I was just kind of really captivated and fascinated and inspired and wanted to start getting back to writing myself. And then I had the pleasure to make a short film that really opened me up. I wrote a short film, and I had never been on set before. I never knew anything about that. And that short film went on and did well. That was 2014. So I was like, oh, I need to get back to my artist self. And that's when I kind of started the process. The next year I moved to LA. And even in moving to LA, though, I really had to develop a healthy relationship with the work. And so that's kind of a little history about why I stopped writing. And then LA, the sort of second half of that is like how I made my comeback once I got to LA.
When I think about the creative comeback, I think about the prompts, and some of the things I think about is you wrote traditional books, you had the publishing deals, the Creative Comeback is a very different book. And so the headspace that you were in, the visions that came, how did the Creative Comeback even come to be in your mind?
So it started out as a course, maybe like in 2017. It started out as a course and I didn't really do much with it. And what's wild now is I forget that it's a book. It almost is like I had to trick myself into writing it by not calling a book, but it's a book. You know what I mean? The Creative Comeback
honey.
is a book. It is a hardcover book. Do you know what I'm saying? And it has beautiful prompts. Look at these beautiful, right? But I think I had to trick myself into writing it by not calling it a book, right? So had the Creative Comeback course, didn't do much with it, let it die. Then I want to say maybe a couple of years ago, or maybe like a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? I want to do a challenge, like an email kind of challenge. And so we launched the 21-day Creative Comeback Challenge, and we did 3 installments of that. And I don't know if you were on any of those, like,
I sure was.
Celebratory calls.
I was.
But I was blown away by how people were talking about this challenge changing their lives. And I was like, not expecting that, right? Even though what I included in here is what changed my life, I didn't expect that sort of same transformation and change to happen in other people's lives. I didn't go into creating the challenge to do that. But once that happened, I said, whoa, okay. So I want to kind of keep this going. And when I was on hiatus, I started to pull the materials together and a book came together. Like, again, I wasn't like set out to write a book. It just came together. And then when I found the wonderful Black woman who designed it, Kayla, I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be doing this book. Let me do this book. And so that's how it kind of came together, was serendipitously.
I think it's interesting because I remember the 21-day comeback challenge. I remember being on it. I remember feeling excited to answer these questions because it was like, oh, no one's ever asked me to sit and think about what my goals were, what I wanted to do, what projects I wanted to work on. And it was something that you had to really actively do. And so when everyone communed together, I was like, oh, this challenge could really be something. And so it made sense that you transitioned it into a book to really have people have something to hold on to and revisit at any given point. And I'm wondering if you thought about it like that as well, for people to be able to go back.
I did want people to be able to go back and revisit. I also love books. I love journals. I love workbooks. I think I always wanted to write a journal secretly. We don't talk enough about our relationship to having a creative practice. So one of the big things about the Creative Comeback is really developing a healthy relationship with the work, developing your own creative practice, and prioritizing that creative practice. I have found that, especially working in Hollywood, it's a few things. One is go, 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 go. So you never really have time to like think about your own creative practice and your own creative process and nurture both of those things. 2, I think that often people think the work comes out of your ass, and it doesn't. It comes out of having great work. To me, comes out of having a solid creative practice and a solid creative process. And nobody was talking about that. But this is what has allowed me to transition into TV writing, allowed me to write again, allowed me to sustain my writing practice, allowed me to continue to love the process, and allowed me to be successful. It wasn't like the things that Hollywood tells you need. It was me having a commitment to craft, a creative practice, and nurturing and prioritizing and protecting those things. I think that's also what I learned in working with Hollywood, is you have to protect your creative practice. You have to protect your creative process, because once you open it up, and you will have to open it up at a certain point, can be chaos. So you need to make sure you have time with the work in a way that works for you, in a way that is sustaining and fortifying and all these things before you open it up. Acting on your ideas is a form of self-love. And when I decided to write the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, it was with you in mind. Storytellers with stories inside of you that you need to get out into the world. But life, fear, uncertainty has a way of leaving us stuck. But no more. It's time to reclaim our creative practice and get unstuck. The Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal can help you get back on creative track. 30 days of dynamic prompts, exercises to stimulate creativity, alongside motivational quotes, journal pages, and more. If you're ready to create again, get your copy of the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal today at creativecomeback.com. That's creativecomeback.com. Because it's never too late to become the artist you always wanted to be.
It makes a lot of sense. I'm curious in the process of you even getting back to yourself. Did anything boop you along the way? Were there any prompts? You were just like, ooh, child. Like, did anything stand out to you as you were creating this book, and even the prompts that you were deciding that were going to make the cut in the Creative Comeback Journal workbook?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I mentioned in the book is I had to have like a psychological shift. And my psychological shift was that writing's job is not to support me. And that's a small nuanced thing because writing is my main bread and butter, right? But when I was trying to get my books, like get some more book business going, when I was trying to sell these proposals, there was a desperation around that. And there was a feeling of like, writing's not supporting me. And so because there was that feeling, I was like, fuck writing. I'm not going to nurture this relationship. I'm just going to let it go. Whereas writing's job is not to support me. Writing's job is to help me understand the world around me. Writing's job is to help me tell the stories that are burning inside. That is the function of writing, not to make me money. My job is to make me money. And sometimes people don't understand that nuance, but for me, it clicked. I was like, oh, I am responsible for making money, not writing. So once I was able to make that distinction, things opened up for me, and I was able to then approach a healthy relationship with the work where it was really about focusing on craft. It was really about creative practice. It was really about getting better. It was about creating sacred rituals around it. It was about those things versus I got to sell this. I got to sell this. I got to sell this. And now that I have a healthy relationship with the writing, I'll be able to write forever. And that is invaluable.
What would you share with anyone that is struggling to even start somewhere in their creative practice? Because I know we're always checking in the Opportunity Roundup newsletter and seeing how people are doing. But I'm curious if there's something that you can share and glean from your own experience on people offering themselves grace, but like wanting to get back to the work, hence them joining the challenge previous years and us redoing it again, for a third round.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things to ask yourself. One of the biggest questions that the Creative Comeback is really built upon is, what are you scared of? Because people are like, how do I get started writing? And I'm like, you get started writing by writing, right? Like that's how you get started. The better question is, why am I not getting started? Right. And to me, the answer is always some form of fear. It may manifest itself in different ways, but to me, it's always some sort of fear of rejection, fear of success, fear of whatever the case is. To me, it's always fear because life is always going to life. Now, we may have seasons that are more busy than others. So that's where we may be taking a rest from the writing, right? But we never give up on it. So I think mainly what happens is there's some sort of fear that is blocking us because as I was mentioning about having a healthy relationship with the work, I don't get writer's block. I don't have writer's block. I'm not blocked. I am free flowing. Okay. I may have story problems that I need to figure out.
Yeah.
I may procrastinate, which also can be a sense of a sort of fear or just laziness on my part. Right. But I'm not blocked. And so that's why the healthy relationship with the work is so important because we don't talk about writer's block anymore. We don't get blocked. We're very clear on what's happening. And I think that's what the Creative Comeback is also encouraging people to do is get clear on what is really going on why you're not creating. What is it really about? Is it life or is it fear?
Yeah, that's good. With you now getting back to writing, I feel like there's some other stuff living in you, some other stories you want to tell. Is there an extension of a creative comeback?
I would love to do retreats. I think that there's definitely more probably like workbooks and ancillary sort of projects that are aligned with the creative comeback, because I do see the creative comeback as an umbrella of finding different ways to get artists, particularly writers, reconnected to their creative practice. Like that's the purpose. So all the ways that I can find to do that, absolutely want to do. But I'd be curious because you have taken the challenge and you have the book. I would love to know your experience with the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal and your own experience of making this comeback. What have you unearthed?
There's definitely a lot of stories within me, and a lot of it is stuck around the fear and not being able to see how it's going to happen. And so even taking it back to the challenge really unearthed like all these projects that I wanted to do. And so when I got the journal, I was like, okay, well, Georgette, what are the projects that you really, really want to do, right? Like, I know we had a shit ton in that email one. We did it like 2 years ago. There's some projects that I really want to work on. The silent short film, the docuseries, like 2 docuseries idea. I became more intentional about some of those things. One thing is in motion right now. I'm working, and we talked about it in episode 12. I'm working with a creative collaborator on. The other one is like seeing other producers and creators around me. I'm like, Georgette, get to the script on writing this silent short film, right? Like, what does that look like? That's something I've never done before. And so I definitely realized there's stories I want to tell. And I want to sit with, and I know in the journal it does this, it forces you to sit down and break down the things that you want to do by steps, small steps. And that's not something that I normally do. I look big and I'm like, oh gosh, where do I start? And it's just like, break it down, break down these steps into small tasks. Yeah. So that's what it unearthed in me getting more intentional about the stories I wanted to tell, but then also like getting to the work to do them, which I haven't done yet.
Yes. And I would also encourage you to go a little deeper about why you haven't started these things.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's usually where the good, juicy, tangled stuff is that we have to work through is like, really, really, why am I not starting this? Because we can blame life all day.
Absolutely.
But sometimes, and most of the time, there's something else at play as well.
I know it's probably wrapped up in, can you really do this, Georgette? Are you really able to write something that's compelling, that's good? And I've already gotten feedback. I had already had this seed planted about the silent short film. So I had a friend, and I was like, how do you write a script for a silent short film? He was like, you just write it as action. Like, what are the characters doing? That was 3 years ago. He left me that voicemail that is still sitting on my phone. And I'm like, Georgette, just start.
Well, that's the thing too, that the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal and the challenge really encourage us to remember is that remember the creative process. It is a process. So the first draft is going to be shitty. That's just what it's going to be. And the thing about the creative process is that it's uncomfortable and it's vulnerable. And a lot of us do not want to sit in the discomfort of this draft is shitty. We do not want to sit in that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I love about the creative process is it has taught me that I know I am going to make this shitty draft sing once I'm done with the creative process. Once I'm done with my creative process, I am so confident that this draft is going to fucking sing. And that's what I want to encourage artists to get to and writers to get to the point of like, it's going to start out one way, but I have my creative practice and I have my creative process. And when I am finished with those that I have, and when I have protected those things, it is going to sing. And I just have such confidence in that. That's just how I create from now, you know? And even like when I was in post for Look Back at It, right? That first cut, honey, I said, I didn't come this far to have a cut, to have a movie that is not going to be what it needs to be. Oh, man. And we just worked that cut until we worked that cut. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we took that cut through the creative process. We took it through the creative process and we leaned into our practice and into our craft. And I just knew on the other side, I said, this is going to be fantastic. I know it is. We're just going to keep working it. And that's what the Creative Comeback is also encouraging us to do.
I'm excited to get to work. So.
Yes. So for those of y'all out there who may feel stuck, who may need to get back into your creative mojo, need to get back onto creative track, that is what the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal is for. That is what the 21-day Creative Comeback Challenge is, which we are launching in June. So stay tuned at thecreatedaily.com. And if you're not on our newsletter yet, the opportunity roundup, and you can sign up for that. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. But that's how you also can stay updated on all the things that we're doing to help and support you as an artist, to help and support your creative practice, to help and support your craft, to help and support your process, as well as your career. I just feel like it's hard for me to understand how I can have a career without having a really strong creative practice and a really strong commitment to craft and a really strong creative process. I encourage you, if you need this book, to get this book. Okay. It is the steps that I took to make this creative comeback. And I didn't just make a creative comeback. I am thriving. I am thriving. I'm thriving creatively. I am thriving creatively. And because I'm thriving creatively, I'm thriving in my career. So the former feeds the latter.
Absolutely. And gift it to your friends. I was able to gift my former boss at VH1.
Amazing.
And a friend that's part of the community. If if you're not in this field, but you know someone that's in your community, absolutely gift it to them. They were so grateful for the journal.
We love that. We love that. Well, that takes us to a segment we like to call How We Create, where we share all forms of inspiration that may have stopped us in our tracks, made us laugh, had us shouting, or even reminded us to rest.
Yeah, in the vein of creating and just even having a practice, I love to go back to sometimes watch things that can help me think about my craft differently. And I want to shout out the movie Her, because it's a masterclass in voice acting.
Oh,
and I just listened to Scarlett Johansson and how they literally, you thought she was on this screen and she was this AI. It gets me every time. I'm like, she nailed this role without being on this screen. And I have been looking at ways to expand what else I want to do in the voice acting space. And so the movie is one thing that I think about and go back and listen to or / watch when it's on or when I get a chance to run it back on demand.
I love that. So for me, I talked about how books became hard for me and I kind of walked away from books, and how the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, I kind of tricked myself into writing a book. Well, now I'm ready again. I love romance so much. I want to write a romance novel. So I've been reading a bunch of romance novels. So I've been reading Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And I just love great writers. And I just am always so inspired, and it's so juicy. And I mean, not juicy from like, the romance is fantastic, but just juicy in the language and the way that the words are put together. And I am just inspired to write. I'm inspired just to continue to work on my craft as a novelist. I have written novels, but it's been a minute. I've also never written a romance. The novels I have written were YA. So this is new terrain for me in terms of writing, but I've read tons of romance novels. So I'm just super excited to be in this space and super excited for writers like Kennedy Ryan, who is just delicious. It's delicious.
It sounds delicious.
Yes. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for listening to another installment of the Creative Cut Up Podcast. And please keep the reviews going. Keep the 5-star ratings
going. Keep that up, please, y'all. Please and thank you.
Thank you. And it just means so much to us when you reach out. So please definitely tag us. We'll have our information in the show notes, but tag us and share it with your friends. Share it with your frenemies. Share it with your aunties. Share it with your pals. Share it with your homeboys, your homegirls, everybody else. Share it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Cut Up Podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you dig it, subscribe, rate, review, and please tell a friend. If you need help getting back into your creative practice, check out the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal. You can also join our newsletter and our We Create Daily community, both of which provide even more resources and opportunities to thrive creatively at thecreatedaily.com. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at The Create Daily. Ever wonder how a novel went from the page to the screen? How an entire film derived from a great magazine article? Or how you get the life rights to tell the story of that fascinating person you met or historical figure you're obsessed with? Learn the process in our new on-demand course called Based On: How to Adapt Books, Articles, and Real-Life Stories for Film and TV. Led by myself, Felicia Pride, and Dria Rowland, Honeychild's creative executive and co-host of the Creative Comeback podcast, you'll learn the process of optioning and developing IP for adaptation, the nuances of 3 different types of adaptations: books, articles, life rights, all the development jargon, what Honeychild looks for and how we source, search, and track IP, plus the answers to all of your burning questions. We'll break down the ins and outs of adapting IP and more. You'll get immediate access to our on-demand course for 6 months upon registration. So sign up today at thecreatedaily.com.